people out there who are being bombarded with communications. So, it's scary and it's overwhelming. And more often than not, you're also trying to juggle children, a job, family, life, add to the list, whatever else is.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Did You Know? My name is Laurie Brooke, and I am the host of this series. I'm from the Relationship Architect, and today I have with me Mia from Grey Rock Consulting. Welcome, Mia.
Hi, Laurie. Thank you for having me.
Now, I'm really excited to have you here because I'll get to your bio in a minute, but Mia, in my view, is solving a real gap in, I suppose, the process of where people are going through the family law, the separation and the divorce journey, and that is with communication.
Yes.
So Mia, for those of you who haven't had the chance of meeting her, she is a very proud mum to two wonderful boys, and for over 16 years has spent her career as a lawyer, navigating complex disputes across the construction, engineering, and infrastructure sector. Now, I know that might sound a little bit bizarre as to why we're now talking to Mia in a family law context, but stick with me here, because what Mia has learned is that even though she's got all of these skills and she deals with people and complex communication issues day in, day out, when it comes to implementing this in your own life, it's very, very different. Stemming from her career and personal experience, Mia is on a mission to guide and empower women in how to communicate with high conflict, controlling, and narcissistic personalities so that they can break free, move forward with their lives. And what she's discovered is that although the knowledge and resources for communicating with these types of personalities are everywhere, when it comes to implementing the tools, it's very challenging. And as an experienced lawyer, trained to stick to the facts and to keep the emotion out of these conversations, she does this day in, day out. But like I said before, when it comes to your own life, it's like you kind of lose sight of all of that training and how to actually implement it. Her experiences, together with the stories shared by many amazing people, led her to truly recognize the need to help other people and to strengthen that muscle in how to actually communicate and navigate in their situation. Mia's speciality is to work with clients who are trying to manage the communication. And that can be seen in so many different ways, and we'll come to that in a minute. But what I love about this is Mia's superpower is that she sees the runway and she has been in your shoes. So she knows what it's like to be on the other side. She's not just a lawyer there saying, hey, you got to do this. She's got that experience and she can actually help you through it. Mia, I know that we've spoken before, but for the purposes of, everybody listening, and I think, we touched on it in your bio there, is that you've got a law degree. You deal with these complex and difficult conversations day in, day out, and yet you found it hard. And so
Absolutely.
When you've got that training and you find it hard, how is somebody without the training supposed to find it easy?
Absolutely. I've experienced these personalities in all sorts of areas, including personal life. And it is so tricky, I think, is the simplest way to put it. It is so tricky. And then when you layer on top of that emotions, whether this be, I do have clients who come to me in a professional context, in a personal context, a majority of personal context. When you layer that emotion on top, when it is someone who, you have loved or you do love or whatever it might be, it is incredibly tricky to step away and see it objectively, really tricky. As you've touched on, I see the runway. There is a runway and there is a destination and you can get there. But what I've learned is that there is so much information out there, readily available, really helpful information in this context. And what I am really talking about, it's quite a niche, which is, those people out there, and it is predominantly women, who are being bombarded with communications, text messages, WhatsApp, emails, phone calls, social media. I've even heard of people getting messages on bank statements, just all sorts of wild and wacky things. and they are being bombarded. And a majority of these communications are voluminous, they're numerous, they're full of allegations, they're full of, so false accusations, a lot of projection, a lot of gaslighting, the list goes on. So, it's scary and it's overwhelming. And more often than not, you're also trying to juggle children, a job, family, life, add to the list, whatever else is happening. And this is entirely overwhelming and all consuming. And you get to a point where you go, how do I make this stop? This is never going to end. It can, and it's tricky. And like I just said before, the information is there, but applying it is really, really, really tough. And that's where I am so passionate. I've said once before, if I could help one woman, and then I thought, no, I don't mean that. I want to help every single person that is experiencing this, because you can get through it. But sometimes you just need that extra help and support to really master these tools and master what you're going through to make your life easier.
I think that's a really important message there, is that it is tricky. And so when you are struggling through this, don't feel like that it's because you're failing in some way, or that, you don't understand what's being communicated, or you're struggling to find your feet, whether it be as a single mum for the first time or whatever the case may be.
Yes.
It's not about you. It's not a failing on your behalf. It's just a process that you need to learn.
Yes.
And you need somebody else to help you.
Yes. And do you know what? I love that you just said that, because so many people think, what's wrong with me? What have I done? There must be something, and let's be honest, you've probably been told for many years that there is something very wrong with you, and it's started off very subtle and it's gotten louder and louder and louder and louder. And, those words absorb and they stay, and you come to believe it. But often people think, oh, maybe there's something very wrong with me. This is all my fault. What have I done to deserve this? It actually isn't a fault in you whatsoever. You're actually probably a shining light, to be honest with you, and that is what attracts these types of personalities to you. So it is not you, and there is a way through it. I love that you said that, Laurie. It's so important.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that, when I was listening to what you were saying before, in terms of the types of communication, because you can be going through this process and you can be getting emails and you can be getting text messages and you can be getting your WhatsApp messages and your Facebook messages, and, wherever else you are, there could be messages coming through. And the bank statements, I have to say, that's the first one for me. I've never heard of that before. But to be receiving these messages constantly, you might be thinking, well, is this normal? Is this not normal? And you think, I have to respond to all of them. But also I think there's opportunity there to realize that most of the time it's full of fluff, and it is there to just overwhelm you.
Yes. So I think if you can imprint on the inside of your mind power and control. So if we're talking to people here who have left, their drivers are power and control. And when you leave, they absolutely feel that they have lost some of it, all of it, part of it, but either way, they don't like it. So they try and find other ways to exert that power and control. Now, communications is a very easy way to do it. It is almost a covert way to do it as well. You'd know as well, Laurie, that a lot of people are like, well, there's no bruises. And there is a saying that sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me. I don't agree with that at all. Words can be psychological weapons without a doubt. And like I said before, when they land and they have a huge impact. So yes, so what they will do is they'll use the communications as their way to, feel like they're getting back some power and some control. And you are absolutely spot on. They know you. They know you inside and out, and they know what will trigger you. They know what will hurt you, and they know how to get a response out of you. And that is exactly what they want. So every time with communications, you really do have to, it sounds really simple, sit back, don't engage, don't defend, don't justify, don't plead, don't explain. You're playing right into their hands. It's exactly what they want. And one of the really tricky skills in all of this is to get their communications and figure out what it is they actually are asking, if anything, because sometimes you don't even need to respond at all.
Yeah. It's one of those things, and you touched on it just then in terms of figuring out what it is that they're actually saying in that message and not responding and not playing into, I suppose, the fluff that surrounds the actual message. When you're going through that process, because I think there's a fine line between responding and being seen to be co-parenting, and responding and being seen to be someone who is not willing to co-parent.
Absolutely.
How do you balance that?
So, grey rock is the most recommended method to communicate with high conflict, controlling narcissistic personalities. But if you are in a family situation and you are in the family court, or there is a prospect of being in the family court, and you do have to be realistic. A lot of us think, no, we never will be, and then all of a sudden there we are. So grey rocking, which is essentially to be as boring as a grey rock. Don't feed them. Don't give them your energy, because it's exactly what they want. But when you are in that context, or you might end up in the family court, you have to be careful, because it could be read as you being quite cold and aloof, not willing to be flexible and accommodate them. Now, it's a really, really tricky line to navigate, because you want to scream at the registrar or the mediator or the judge or whoever you're before and just go, you don't know who I'm dealing with. Now, they don't, this sounds awful, but they don't really care. They've got a long docket, they've got a long day, the courts are overwhelmed. They want you out of the system, is the reality. So, you do have to tweak your responses in that scenario. There's and it can be done. You can be courteous without explaining, justifying, defending yourself. You can accommodate things, and you can do it in a nice way, so that you are not seen to be the one who is blocking all attempts at working together. It can be done. Again, it's another set of skills. But I am so I'll probably say this so many times you'll tell me to stop, Laurie. I am so passionate about teaching, and it is predominantly women, these skills and how to do it, so that they never, ever need to talk to me ever again. And they get their lives back, and they get to a stage where they see these communications. Not only do the communications reduce, and you'll also start to see them start to mirror your communication, which is a very funny day when that comes, but to the point where you're indifferent to the communication, and you see what they're doing. You see what they're trying to do, and you look at it and you're like, oh, here we go again. That is a beautiful day, and it's a liberating day. And I want to get every woman there tomorrow, pretty much, is what I would like to do.
But that to me comes with not only learning about the communication style and how to implement those skills, but then also understanding yourself and what impacts you and what sets you off.
Yes. You can, with me or without me, you can learn these skills. Absolutely. But it is critical to focus on you in parallel. Whatever that looks like for you, whether it's a psychologist, counseling, therapy of some sort. I'm a huge advocate for kinesiology. Whatever that might be, where you are working on you. And I do want to note here in this context, I'm sure people are listening and thinking, oh my gosh, counseling, experts, lawyers, forensic accountants, court, the list goes on, and you see all the dollar signs. I really do view it as an investment in you, as opposed to, oh my gosh, all I'm doing is spending money. It is an investment in you, because the way that they are able to trigger you and the way that they are able to get under your skin and get those responses is because they know you, and they know your fears. They know what you feel guilty about. They know what you feel shame around. They know all of that. So that's why the work on you in parallel is so important. So you get to a place, we're all human beings. We've all made mistakes. We've all made decisions that in hindsight we go, gosh, wish I didn't do that. And that's okay. And you can work on yourself where you're like, yeah, I made that decision. Wasn't the best decision I've ever made, but I did it. And we all move on and everything's going to be okay. You take that power away from them to trigger you and upset you. And you get very clear on your boundaries and you get very clear on who you are. Because what I can almost guarantee, what I see is so many people have slowly but surely had their self-confidence chipped away, their self-worth, their self-esteem, who they are, chip ever so slowly. And it's insidious. And then before you know it, you don't know who you are anymore. So this process is so important. And that's what helps you apply these tools, but also helps you get to that point where you're like, nah, see what they're up to today. Here we go. I'll respond in a couple of days' time. You know, it's so important because you've got to build you back because you has been chipped away. I could almost guarantee it with everyone.
Yep. And I think in this process, it is one of the most important things to do.
Yes.
And,
yes.
you know, you mentioned seeing the dollar signs, and for a lot of people out there, yes, that's the first thing that they'll be thinking of. And then the next thing will be, well, where do I fit it in terms of the time? You know, when I'm trying to be mum, I'm trying to get a job, I'm trying to hold down a house, I'm trying to do the court proceedings, whatever the case may be, where do I fit it in terms of time? But I do think that it's one of those things that you have to make time for. And if you do it before you do the court proceedings and all of that, you're going to be so much stronger and so much more able to deal with what comes out of those proceedings.
Yeah.
And it's going to be better for you and your family.
I do think, and Laurie, you could absolutely comment on this. I feel that if you go into that context, so maybe you are told you have to go and try and mediate your custody situation, for example. If you go into that with that energy of, I need the mediator to know that this is who he is. And I need the mediator to know that he's high conflict. And I need them to know that he doesn't care about that energy. It doesn't work. Yeah. If you go into that mediation, you know, the court appearance, whatever it might be, and you're like, I know my truth. I know what is happening in my family. I know the impact on my children. I know what he is doing. I'm good in my truth. It completely changes the atmosphere, the scene. Oh, I can tell you no judge, no magistrate, and probably no mediator wants to hear, oh, I think he's a narcissist. None of them want to hear it. It will backfire on you in a big way. Instead, you have to explain the behaviors that you are experiencing. Don't diagnose them unless you are appropriately qualified to diagnose them. And even in saying that, you would never diagnose your partner. So get out of that field altogether and stop labeling and diagnosing. Nobody in that environment likes to hear it. And you talk about the behaviors that you're experiencing. But if you are calm within yourself and you know that you are taking the steps that are right for you and your family, it just changes things so much.
It makes it easier, I think, too, for you. And that's the key, because this whole process is a journey that you have to go on. And you can go on the journey struggling, and you can still be struggling 10, 15 years down the track. Or you can decide that you don't want to be that person anymore, and that you want to grow, and that you want to make your life as easy as possible.
Yes. And it was, for me, it was simple as that. It got to a point because there was so much shame and embarrassment where I think, how am I in this situation? I'm educated. How has this happened to me? And then you come to learn, well, this happens to a lot of educated females. But there was so much shame. And I thought, these communications and these accusations are going to either drive me down to the ground or they won't. And I know that sounds really simple, but I certainly had a no. no more of this. This is not happening to me. And I went on a mission to understand, how to navigate my way through this, because there were too many things that were more important to me, my well-being, my children, my family. And I decided no. I've implemented, like you said at the beginning, I've implemented these tools. It's not easy. It's not smooth sailing. They actually really don't like it at first because that's not the person they're used to. So there's a process, but I know that they work. And I know the power of coming back to yourself and putting yourself and your family and your priorities first, and the power of working on you to realize I deserve better than this, and this is not my fault. And I want to live a happy life, and I want to show my family and my children how you can stand up for yourself and not be treated poorly. It's just, I'll say it again, I am so passionate about this, Laurie. It's not funny.
I love it. I love it. One of the questions I really want to ask you is, in this whole process and in helping all of the people that you have helped, where do you find people struggle the most?
Where they struggle the most is, there's so many elements to it, but it is the very beginning where more often than not, the clients come to me and they're like, I don't know, what is this? Well, what is happening here? And when you talk to them, there's that moment of relief where they go, you get it. It's like, yes, I get it. It means so much. Applying the tools, it's almost like, again, logically, they get the tools, but there is this emotional layer. They're like, but I should explain. I'm like, no, you do not need to explain that at all. That is the really tricky part. And that is where the work on you comes hand in hand, because you'll realize you don't need to justify certain things. There's certain things that is none of their business. If you're co-parenting, if we can call it co-parenting with them, the children matter. That's it. But what you wore to the shops, who cares? So it's that. And the other thing that I'll say is very difficult for a lot of clients is accepting who that person is. That is really, really, really tricky. And it's a huge key or a huge piece of the puzzle, because whilst you are in a place of, if I just explain, if I just remind him that I've never done that, if I just refer him to the email where he said the opposite, I'm like, no. You are getting into a war with the master of wars. Don't get into the war. Stay out. Avoid the fire. Don't touch the stove. It burns every time. So accepting who that person is a really big part of it. And it's not easy, because, look, a majority of the people that I work with, they love this person. It's very hard to accept, and a lot of people want to try and fix them or help them. That's something you will never be able to do, and it's not your job. It is not your job.
No. And I don't think it's unrealistic to think that we've got the ability to change somebody else and how they behave.
The only way that person can change is if they think something is wrong or needs help, and they go and seek the help. Now, the reality is, with these personality types, they don't think anything is wrong. So, that's their journey. It's not yours. It is not your job to fix them.
Well, I love that message. In terms of co-parenting communications and keeping it focused on the children, when the other parent is trying to bring in, what they wore to the shops or what they let the children wear to the shops that day, how do mums, because we're primarily talking about women in this situation, how do they let go of that fluff and focus on the message?
It is so difficult. I hear you all, and I acknowledge every single mum in this situation, because your child, your children, they're your world. And more often than not, they are used in this process to get under your skin. So, it's so important to know that I see all of you. It's so tricky, so tricky. I talk about knowing your guiding compass or your North Star, for example, which is what do you want at the end of this? One of mine is what is in the best interests of my children. When I come back to that every single time, there are times I'm asked for things where I want to say no, because when I asked for it, you said no, so no. And I'm like, stop. Is it in the best interests of them? It is. So yes, you can. Every time I will do that. It's not easy. It is not easy at all. But I'm not there for a tit for tat. I'm not there to punish because I didn't get the same thing. I know that when I need something, I've got to accept before asking for it that I might not get it. It takes all the power out of it. I'm like, I might get it, I might not. And that's okay if I don't. So I flip that as well when I'm asked. And there are times where I have to push back. Absolutely. There are times when my clients have to push back, and there's a way to do it. But there are also times where you go, okay, well, if your guiding compass is their best interests, this is in their best interest. This is something that's good for them. It's really hard because it truly is putting something other than you first. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Really hard.
And it's also putting your children before your ex as well in that circumstance. And
yes.
A lot of people might see that as giving the ex what they want, as opposed to putting the children first. And I think that's the reframe that has to be really seen. And
yes.
I love how
yes.
you just pointed out that you kind of got to accept before you even ask that it could happen, it might not. A bit like winning the lotto. I put the ticket on, might get it, I might not.
Once you accept, this comes back to accepting who you're dealing with. Once you accept who you are dealing with, truly accept it. It's not just for face value. So it doesn't come easily, and it does require work. You know the lay of the land for you. It's very different. And I also want to say, I know that there are so many well-meaning friends, family members, people out there who go, just try and work with him and maybe just give him this and then he'll give you the. Now, the guidance is well-intentioned, but if you have not navigated this situation, your guidance is often bad because they don't understand who you're dealing with. So stop looking for the outside world to validate what you're doing. Stop looking to the outside world to go, oh gosh, maybe I've done the wrong thing because everyone thinks I'm being unreasonable. A common theme, come back to you. This is your world and other people might not understand it. Come back to you. You know who you're dealing with. It's none of your business what other people think, and it's none of your business. You certainly don't have the time to convince everyone else of who this person is. Not your journey, right? Take all of that noise out. Again, tricky. It sounds really easy. It's tricky, but you get there, and it's just so freeing when you get there, where you're like, I'm good. I know my story. I know what's happened. I know who I'm dealing with. I know my schedule, and I know if I need something different, I might not get it. Or it'll come with a barrage of, all sorts of weird and wacky things I've seen. But that's okay. And if I get it, great. And if I don't, I don't. It is so freeing when you can get to that stage, but it really is a process.
Yeah. But it's a process that you're willing to help people on, not just tell them that it's a process. You're there to actually help and walk that journey with them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because I've seen it with clients and I've lived it. I know it. I know how wonderful it is. And that's why it's just so important, because no one deserves to be living in this every day for the rest of their lives. They really don't. So there's a way out and there's help. So take it, grab it with both hands and invest in you.
Love it. Now, I want to point out to everyone who's listening that Mia is developing a program to actually help you with this. So if you've got any questions about that, by all means, get in contact with her. Her details will be below the video, but her website is greyrockconsulting.com.au.
Yes.
Yes. And there is just one thing I want to ask before we leave. I know you said that predominantly your clients are female. Do you work with men as well?
Yes, so I have had some men come through. It is predominantly with females, but there are men experiencing it. So it's not to say that there are not these personality types that are females. There are certainly men, and they've got their own things that they are working through because they feel ashamed that they are in this situation. So it happens to everyone. It does not discriminate. And if you are sitting out there like me thinking, well, I'm educated and I'm got a great job and I'm in this senior role, and how embarrassing for me. It's not embarrassing. It's happening to so many of us. So there are people out there who can help you.
Beautiful. Mia, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we leave?
Oh, there's so many things and you'll cut me off. Just look, to be honest, I hope that if this resonates with any of your listeners, and I'm sure it will, to know that you're not alone. There are so many people going through this, sadly, but it's true. You're not alone. There are experts out there who can help you. You should not do this alone. It is tricky to do alone, and it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but why would you take 6 years to do something when you could take 6 months? You know, invest in yourself. It will pay such dividends in the long run, and you can live the life that you deserve. It's so important.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on today. And I can't wait to find out more about your program. I know that there are a lot of people out there who, they're just feeling so overwhelmed and I think exhausted, emotionally exhausted from having to deal with this day in, day out. And you're the only one that I know of who's actually there willing to, jump on the journey with them and help them with this part of the communication. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you for having me on. And I just want to rid everyone of this experience. So I really appreciate you having me on.
That is awesome. And let's join you on that journey. Thank you so much, Mia.
Thanks, Laurie. Experiencing this because you can get through it. You're not alone. There are experts out there who can help you. You should not do this alone. It is tricky to do alone, and it doesn't mean that you can't do it, but why would you take 6 years to do something when you